Celebrities. I'm sorry to be the one to have to break this to you, but we do not care, not in the slightest particle of an imaginary thing, what you think. If this surprises you, I understand, because, let's be fair, we have played an important role in your delusion. We camp out for days to buy tickets to your sold-out shows, then shout for you to reach down from the stage to touch our hands. Faster than science would believe humanly possible, we learn the lyrics to your every song and master the choreography to your every dance move. We devour your movies, TV shows, and Netflix specials. From that angle, I suppose it's easy to believe that after all the adulation, all the fan mail, and all the magazine covers, you may have actually come to believe that we care what you think. But you're wrong. Nobody cares what you think. Nobody. Well, maybe your mother and your therapist do, but we don't. Not even a little. Allow me to spell this one out for you. I go to a Lady Gaga concert to hear her belt out tunes that remind me of my messy college days. But watching her desperate protest against the results of a free and fair election? Hardly an event I'd ever care to see again in my lifetime. I follow Beyonce because, let's face it, nobody does a breakup anthem better. But can someone please tell me why I should care if she's for Hillary or for Garfield the cat? And here's to you, Marc Jacobs. You design a killer pair of shoes, but as a political philosopher, you leave a lot to be desired. In fact, it's difficult to comprehend why you thought it necessary to publicly refuse to dress our First Lady. And to the scores of celebrities who threaten to move out of the country if we don't vote your way, wow. Just how long on a private jet must one travel to reach that level of narcissism? This may rock your glittery world, but we don't care whether you stay in America or move to another country. Why would we care where you live? On the one hand, we should find all of this amusing, but on the other, it's actually deeply offensive. It's offensive that you confuse our admiration for blind faith. When Eminem raps that I have to either pick him or the President of the United States, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Which is why it's important that I take this moment to offer each and every one of you celebs a free ride back down to planet Earth. What happens outside of your gated communities, chauffeured SUVs, and personal assistant's iPhone is the real world. It's the rest of us working very hard to earn a living, working toward that weekend break when we can perhaps afford to treat ourselves to your concerts, your movies, and your handbags. You see, we want to enjoy what you do. Sing, dance, act, design. It's a wonderful gift you have, and it's extremely valuable, not only to you, but to us. Entertaining people, making them laugh or cry, is something that you should take pride in. You enrich our world with your talent. But when you go on a political rant on late-night TV or call your fans racist and sexist, my God, these people are your fans. Just because they don't think or vote the way you want them to? You cross a line. You lose touch with reality. You become just another shill for another politician. And who wants to be a fan of that? I'm Candace Owens for Prager University. You've heard about the Black Card, right? No, not the one from Visa or American Express. This one is much more valuable. There are entire organizations that have been built upon it, and individuals that have used it to acquire both wealth and influence. If this sounds like something you might wish to own, you should know that there is only one way you can get your hands on it. You have to be born with black skin. That's the only requirement. Really. You can be poor, middle class, rich, it doesn't matter. The Black Card will still confer upon you an entire history of oppression, even if you've never been oppressed. Flash the black card and most white people will cower. Play the black card expertly and you can win awards, make millions, all the while claiming that the people who got you there somehow hate you. With a black card, you can sell books full of indecipherable prose, because with a card that powerful, who cares if your words make any sense? You can call yourself a civil rights leader and shake down multinational corporations, or you can torch your own neighborhood because you didn't like the outcome of a grand jury verdict. Ironically, the people you might think have the most legitimate claim to the black card refuse to use it. Take my grandfather, for instance. He raised me from the time I was 9 years old. Born in 1941 in rural North Carolina, he started working at age 5, laying out tobacco to dry on a sharecropping farm. Jim Crow, separate drinking fountains, and the KKK were ever-present realities. He was 17 when he married my grandmother. He made a living cleaning homes and office buildings until he saved up enough money to open his own cleaning business. The thing is, he never played any card. Nor did my grandmother. If they had problems, they didn't blame anybody. They just fixed them. And they raised me to do the same. Chores were a requirement in their household. So was reading the Bible every morning before school. I didn't like the Bible readings and I hated the chores, but I realize now that these small acts of discipline, although sometimes stifling, had a strong, positive impact on my character. I was a first-generation college student. This was supposed to be the ticket to prosperity, but it wasn't. I left college with a mountain of debt and no practical skills. I had just $80 in my bank account and very few prospects. I could have given up. I could have dug deep into my history and declared myself a natural product of ancestral oppression. I could have played the black card and absolved myself of all responsibility for my own stupid decisions. Except I didn't. Because it would have destroyed my grandfather's legacy. I am proud that he had the fortitude to turn nothing into something, and I have no intention of reversing that something back into a nothing. My attitude comes with a price, however. Because if you are born black and you don't accept your natural status as a victim, then the validity of your blackness is immediately called into question. Well, so be it. If believing in myself, if accepting the responsibility for my failures somehow disqualifies me from owning an imaginary card, then let me be the first to declare that I don't want one. I also don't want Cornel West, Al Sharpton, or insert anyone else who uses their skin color to game the system as a role model. I already have my grandfather. If there is one thing that my family history has taught me, it's that I do not need a black card or an imaginary anything to make something of myself. For the record, my grandfather, now retired, lives in a home that he and my grandmother built on a plot of land they purchased in North Carolina. The very same sharecropping farm that he worked on as a small child. His story is unique. His story is beautiful. Because it's American. And that's the only card I've ever been interested in playing. I'm Candace Owens for PragerU University. And now for a brief history of slavery. Here's the first thing you need to know. Slavery was not invented by white people. It did not start in 1619 when the first slaves came to Jamestown. It existed before then. It did not start in 1492 when Columbus discovered the New World. In fact, when the intrepid explorer landed in the Bahamas, the native Taino tribe hoped that he would help them defeat their aggressive neighbors, the Caribs. The Caribs enslaved the Taino and, on occasion, served them for dinner. Slavery existed in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The word slave actually comes from the Slavs of Eastern Europe. Millions of them, all white by the way, were captured and enslaved by Muslims in the 9th century and later by the Ottoman Turks. Slavery existed when the Roman Empire controlled the Mediterranean and most of Europe from the 1st through the 5th centuries. Slavery existed when Alexander the Great conquered Persia in the 4th century BC. It was so common that Aristotle simply considered it natural. The slave-master model was just how the world operated in the great philosopher's day. Slavery existed during the time of the ancient Egyptians 5,000 years ago. As far back as we can go in human history, we find slavery. As renowned historian John Steele Gordon notes from time immemorial, slaves were a major item of commerce. As much as a third of the population of the ancient world was enslaved. Here's the second thing you need to know. White people were the first to formally put an end to slavery. In 1833, Britain was the first country in the history of the world to pass a Slavery Abolition Act. They were quickly followed by France, who in 1848 abolished slavery in her many colonies. Then, of course, came the 13th Amendment in the United States Constitution. After centuries of human slavery, white men led the world in putting an end to the abhorrent practice. That includes the 300,000 Union soldiers, overwhelmingly white, who died during the Civil War. Now, am I saying that this makes white people better than anyone else? Of course not. My purpose here is to simply tell the truth, and the truth is that human history is complicated. No one, regardless of skin color, stands guiltless. Yet today we are never told to consider the murderous Persian Empire or the cannibalism of indigenous tribes of North and South America or the heinous actions under the imperialistic Muslim, Chinese, Mongol, or Japanese empires, to name just a few. Instead, we're told that slavery is a white phenomenon. And like all persistent lies, this lie spawns a bunch of other lies. On social media, I come across extraordinary depictions about how Africans lived like pharaohs before Europeans came and laid waste to their paradise. I wish any of this were true, but it's not. It's a fantasy. The truth is that Africans were sold into slavery by other Black Africans, and in many cases, sold for items as trivial as gin and mirrors. Whites didn't go into the interior and round up the natives. They waited on the coast for their Black partners to bring them Black bodies. The stark reality is that our lives had very little value to our ancestors. Here's the third thing you need to know. If you think slavery is a relic of the past, you're wrong. There are some 700,000 slaves in Africa today, right now. That's the lowest estimate that I could find. Other sources say there are many more. For context, that's almost twice as many slaves as were ever brought to the United States. Child soldiers, human trafficking, forced labor, these are the conditions that currently exist within the same sub-Saharan region where the transatlantic slave trade originated. African bodies are being sold today like they were sold then, and no, they are not being purchased by any country of white men. In fact, slavery, by any traditional definition, is exclusively practiced today within non-white countries. But we hear almost nothing about that. Just like we hear nothing about how slavery was universal until good people in Europe and America ended it 2 centuries ago. Why? Because our so-called leaders, Black and white, wouldn't profit from it. Black victimhood is nothing if not profitable. It elects politicians and funds racial grievance groups. And if Black Americans began to view themselves as partners in the American dream, if we embraced the patriotic spirit that holds all men are created equal, the patriotic spirit that is our real heritage, then the race hustlers would soon be out of business. And who wants that? I'm Candace Owens, author of Blackout for Prager University. In the first half of the 19th century, 4 million Blacks worked as slaves imprisoned on plantations in the American South. They were prevented from learning how to read, their families were forcibly broken up, and if they tried to escape, they were severely and brutally punished. The owners of these plantations were almost without exception Democrats. Before the Civil War, slave-owning Democrats used black bodies to massively increase the number of votes they got in Congress and the Electoral College. Because of the 3/5 compromise, a single Democrat in Georgia who owned 5 slaves got 4 times the representation as a single white abolitionist in Pennsylvania who didn't own any. So for Democrats, it has always been about using black bodies for political power. How they are used may vary, but the plantation model remains a constant, even today. Despite the fact that blacks are no longer enslaved, many black children barely learn to read in poorly performing schools. Our families are often shattered by misguided welfare policies, and if we try to escape, we still face punishment. Of course, the plantations of the 21st century are not physical, they are virtual. The owners of these plantations are once again, almost without exception, Democrats. Think about it. What today are certain areas of Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, St. Louis, Atlanta, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia, all run for decades by Democrats, but virtual plantations? Many who live in these areas are largely, if not totally, dependent on their masters, the politicians, for their food, housing, and health care. It's hardly a fair exchange. The politicians become wealthy. The residents become vote slaves, sustained just barely by government transfer payments. And just like the plantations of yesteryear, which demanded a consistent breakdown of the black family to reinforce its system of buying and selling slaves, Democrats today incentivize similar family corrosion through their policies, fostering dependence not on mom and dad, but on the government. To give just one example, virtually every inner-city school provides free breakfast and lunch. Sounds generous, but what it really does is remove the traditional responsibility from parents by handing it over to the state. Yet many do break free from this oppressive system. Like the fugitive slave Frederick Douglass once did, they run toward a better life. But leaving the plantation still entails great risk. Of course, today it's not the whip or the lash, it's libel and slander. The purpose is to bring black conservatives within an inch of their professional and sometimes personal lives a warning that rebellion will not be tolerated. Don't believe it? Just ask Dr. Ben Carson, Hoover Institution economist Thomas Sowell, or Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, to cite 3 prominent examples. Carson, one of the most celebrated brain surgeons of the modern era, has been called stupid by the legacy media because he has conservative political views. Thomas Sowell, who went to Harvard and taught at Cornell, Amherst, and UCLA, and may be the nation's most brilliant economist, has largely been ignored, while many lesser lights have been celebrated. Clarence Thomas, one of the luminous legal minds of our time, was the victim of a massive smear campaign during his nomination to the Supreme Court. Because of his conservative views, his reputation was dragged through the media mud. This is how he described the experience. It is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you. You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured, rather than hung from a tree. Today's plantation owners will do anything to hold on to what they see as their property. Little wonder. In 2012, Barack Obama received 93% of the black vote. In 2016, Hillary Clinton received 88%. That dip was a critical factor in Clinton's loss. The Democrats know that they can't lose the black vote and win a national election, so they make up lies. They say America was founded for the purpose of perpetuating slavery. They say white people hate us. They say the entire system is racist and that our only hope is them. The same old Democrats. The plantation owners know what will happen if blacks demand that their children receive a good education, if they shake off their dependence on government handouts. if they refuse to see themselves as victims and instead embrace all the opportunities America offers. The plantation system would collapse once and for all. In the 19th century, we had to depend on others to be liberated. This time, we have to do it ourselves. Will we? I'm Candace Owens, author of Blackout: How Black America Can Make Its Second Escape from the Democrat Plantation for Prager University.